Nikki Haley goes on CNN and absolutely has an unhinged interview about China. And Jake Tapper, the neocon Jake Tapper, is almost like the instigator. You can feel it in the interview that he's kind of trying to goad her on, trying to like instigate her to do more, to be more neoconish. Let's listen to this unhinged interview. State of the Union.
With frustration, calling it, quote, nothing to be proud of after G20 members Russia and China had resisted stronger language in that final statement. Let's get straight to Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley for her response to President Biden's trip. She's also the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. Ambassador Haley, thanks so much for joining us. Last year's G20 statement, as you know, explicitly condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine, though, of course, Russia did not sign off on that part of the statement. This year, the final statement stopped short of any direct comment.
So let's make sure we understand what they're talking about here. There's just literally a statement about Ukraine that shows that the G20s and G20 countries are all uniformly against this. Last year, they came out with a statement. This year, they're saying the statement wasn't strong enough. So we're just talking about strongly worded letters here, okay? That's all we're talking about. Nothing really tangible. Let's listen.
Condemnation of the invasion. What is your reaction? What do you think is more important, unanimity or an explicit condemnation?
It was a win for Russia and China. They're celebrating today. I mean, what we should have had was Biden should have really pushed hard to acknowledge what he acknowledged a year ago, that Russia invaded a pro-American, freedom-loving country. And that's a fact. And to deny a fact a year later is giving a win to Russia, and China is gloating because they're looking at Taiwan as this is happening, and it's a shame.
Some House Republicans, as you know, are fighting to...
China is gloating. Do you understand how cartoonish that is? Like, the American political system, the American propaganda machine, make these sort of cartoonish kind of caricatures out of the bad guys. Like they're laughing, ha 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 ha, ha, rolling their hands like this. Ha, 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 ha. Look what happened. That's not happening, but that's the image they want to give off as the with China and Russia in particular, as she does here. Let's continue.
Strip $24 billion in aid to Ukraine out of the upcoming government.
Let me rewind it just a second here to make sure we get that full thought here on this.
A year later is giving a win to Russia, and China is gloating because they're looking at Taiwan.
Look how he instigates here. Watch Jake Tapper.
Some House Republicans, as you know, are fighting to strip $24 billion in aid to Ukraine out of the upcoming government spending bill. Do you think that would be a mistake?
I think that you have to look at the fact that 3.5% has been spent from our defense budget towards Ukraine. That's just 3.5%. That percentage of GDP, 11 European countries have spent more than us. We know that Russia has said once they take Ukraine, Poland and the Baltics are next. And then you're looking.
That's an outright lie. That's an outright lie. In order to sell Ukraine, you have to lie as if Ukraine is the first country of Russia's westward march towards imperialism to take over all the Balkans. That's not what's happening. That's not what was said. That's what you have to pretend in order to sell your case. That's how bad your case is.
Looking at a full-on war. What we're trying to do is prevent war. That's a pretty good return on investment to prevent war. So I think that we need to continue giving them equipment.
Understand what they're saying here. The 3% investment in a war is to stop a war. We have to invest in a war in order to stop a war. Let me just get through this. Let's get through this.
And ammunition with our allies to win. I don't think we need to give them straight up cash. I don't think we need to put troops on the ground, but we need to finish this because we have to always remember a win for Russia is a win for China. They've made that very clear. And right now, China is our number one national security threat.
So House Republicans should keep that Ukraine spending in the spending bill and should not separate it.
You see how he's trying to make sure he gets her on camera saying, keep the money in. Republicans are trying to take it out. He wants them to keep it in. This is the middle ground network. You see the bipartisan nature in the war propaganda? He has no pushback about any of this. He's questioning her as if he agrees with everything she says. Let's continue.
And should support it.
Republicans and Democrats should not pull in Afghanistan. Don't go pulling out now.
Oh my God.
Putin is at rock bottom. We know that because he's getting drones from Iran and missiles from North Korea. We know that because they've raised the draft age in Russia to 65. Finish this. Biden has.
Don't pull in Afghanistan. We don't have troops there, so how can they pull in Afghanistan? There is no troops there, so how can what you describe as the debacle of Afghanistan, not in this interview, in a different one, the debacle of Afghanistan and what happened, what troops are going to be pulled out? Just the money flow is going to stop.
Has missed multiple opportunities to finish this. We need to make sure that we end this war quickly, that we finish it, but we do it the right way. We don't want a further war, and the only way we can do that is to have Ukraine win. And there's no one that wants the Ukrainians to win more than the Taiwanese, because they know that if Ukraine wins, China will stay away from Taiwan. And so, yes, I think Republicans and Democrats.
If Ukraine wins, China will stay away from Taiwan. It's so much lies. You know, Ukraine wins. I'm gonna play this some more. This is the level of propaganda, the level of relentless propaganda that the Ukraine war has brought on is obscene, because people don't want the war. They know this in the polls. That's why they don't bring up the polls anymore. Instead of doing what people want, which is illustrated in the polls, they come in and say, no, we need to stay here. And this is why we need to stay here. We're not going to do what you guys want us to do with your money. We're going to keep giving it to weapons manufacturers.
Democrats need to keep their eye on the ball, and that is, let's finish this mission in Ukraine, and then we will handle Russia and China by just doing that.
Your fellow candidates, Chris Christie and Mike Pence, have traveled to Ukraine this year. Are you planning on traveling to Ukraine?
Why is Jake Tapper so focused on making sure Nikki Haley shows her support, overwhelming support for the Ukraine war? Why is that the target of the segment? Because of the fear of what the GOP is doing, trying to strip the money out of the GOP? I'm sorry, out of the bill that they have, $24 billion they want to include. All right, let's listen a little more. We'll close up.
Plan on traveling to Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, and the rest of the country. I don't have time to go to another country right now. I'm trying to earn the support of many Americans.
A special United Nations commission looking into human rights violations in Ukraine recently said that it had, quote, not reached a conclusion.
He literally did not intake what she said, because this is not a dialogue. She said something and he just went on into his pre-approved lines. This is not a dialogue. He's just rambling off said weapon manufacturer's questions to her, and then that's it. He doesn't care what her reaction is. Doesn't feel like it at all. And listen to it again. Listen to when she ends. How could he have taken in what she said in order to process another question? He didn't. It's almost like he's not even listening to her.
Listen. To Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, and the rest of the country. I don't have time to go to another country right now. I'm trying to earn the support of many Americans.
A special United Nations commission looking into human rights violations in Ukraine recently said that it had, quote, not reached a conclusion whether there's genocide in Ukraine. You were the UN ambassador. Is that finding acceptable to you? Do you think Russia is committing genocide in Ukraine?
Wow.
Well, first of all, it's hard to believe anything the UN says. It's a bit political. It's usually China biased. And it's also Russian, intruding into whatever they put out there. I think that what you have is, you know, when I was at the United Nations, we had no better friend than Ukraine. They voted with us on everything. They were supportive of everything that we did, and they're pro-American. And I think what we know is that they're a democracy. And the reason that they are so careful in this war is they're trying to protect people and trying to prevent Ukrainians from dying. I think if there's any bullseye, you need to be looking at Russia. They're the ones that have invaded. They're the ones that are targeting schools. They're the ones that continue to have death that they don't care about. And I think that's the one we really need to be talking about. So I don't take any UN report too seriously.
On the subject of China, the Biden administration, as you know, recently sent 4 top officials to China to try to stabilize relations. You have said the Biden administration has the wrong approach because they're looking for win-win cooperation with China. You say, quote, they don't see us as a competitor. They see us as an enemy, unquote. Do you view China as an enemy?
China's been practically preparing for war with us for years. Yes, I view China as an enemy.
They've been practically preparing for war for them for years. These neocons, they're going to kill us one way, either the planet or by war. What threat does China pose to the United States? Talking about military threat. We have 800 bases, more closely to probably more like 1,000 if we're talking about secret bases. What do they have? 1 or 2, 3? What threat? What war have they been preparing? Are you talking about sending submarines over or sending, I forget what they sent to Australia. Are you talking about that? That seems like we're preparing for war with them. What are we doing in the China Straits? What are we doing over there? I understand if people are still buying this. I'm trying to get through this.
About what Biden has done is here you have China has bought up 400,000 acres of U.S. soil, most recently near Grand Forks Air Force Base. They bought our largest pork producer in the country. They continue to steal $600 billion of intellectual.
So what Jake Tapper and this show, this is to build up anger against China. That's what this is about. Because in order to go to war, if they're planning to go to war in 2025, and they've already said it, a country can't just go to war. The people will be against it. They have to build up animosity towards said country. So you do with things like China spy balloon, stuff like that. Or things like what she's saying right here. They haven't been doing anything to escalate anything.
Intellectual property. They're sending millions of dollars to our universities and stealing our research and spreading propaganda. 90% of our law enforcement drones are Chinese. So while Americans freaked out over the Chinese spy balloon, just imagine what's happening with all these mini spy balloons. They have killed more Americans than the Iraq, Afghanistan, and Vietnam wars combined with their sending fentanyl over. I mean, how much more has
Wow.
Just imagine.
Listen to this.
$100 billion
And we're going to end it on
property.
this.
They're sending millions of dollars to our universities and
This
stealing
is
our research and spreading
unhinged.
propaganda. 90% of our law enforcement drones are Chinese.
Not this
So
part,
while
the next
Americans
one.
freaked out over the Chinese spy balloon, just imagine what's happening with all these mini spy balloons. They have killed more Americans than the Iraq, Afghanistan, and Vietnam wars combined with their sending fentanyl over. I mean, how much more has to...
You get what she's doing. She's trying to make a moral equivalence. Yeah, we killed all those people. And you notice the countries she named, all the countries she invaded? Iraq, Iran? They've killed more than us. That's the way you're going to say China has committed more atrocities in war, has a larger body count, as you're trying to say it's this indirect way you're trying to make. Gotcha. This is the establishment. They are pushing for Nikki Haley so bad. They want her to run like so bad. Both sides. They feel like Nikki Haley is a conservative that even Democrats, especially those in the suburbs, could vote for. And both sides are okay with her winning office.